Welcome. My name is Saskia. I'm the founder of Ecofluency. The work that I do with Ecofluency is to teach and consult in nature communication. Mostly I work online, sometimes in person, and also to promote the voices of others within the field of nature communication. I have the honor of working with various people around the world, and I'm also an associate here at Kwendalo, so I'm very honored that I get to host events here and to have such amazing people join these events. Rather than me reading out Paul's bio, I'm going to hand over to him to share a little bit about himself, and then we're going to share with you more about using astral structures in enhancing your nature communication. Paul.
Yeah, so firstly, hello everybody. Thank you very much for coming to listen to little old me from Bonnie, Scotland. I can thank you very much to Saskia to put all of this on. Really appreciate that. And just judging, not that one should judge a book by its cover, but I can see that there's a lot of open-mindedness here already, which is very refreshing for me from trying to talk about this stuff back in the UK or particularly in Scotland, where you're almost branded a witch or some freak at the best, right? So I'm really, really appreciative that you're here and you've taken time to come and listen to me. We're going to be talking about stuff that you probably know about. There's going to be stuff that you probably don't know about. And do feel free to ask questions, particularly if it sounds like I'm not necessarily making sense. I know you're going to keep me on track on that. I'm not saying that I'm not going to make sense, but because we're talking about abstract things, I want to make sure that you do understand. I want to make sure that everybody understands what it is that I am trying to communicate. And we like the interaction, right? We're looking for a discussion around it too. So please feel free to put your hand up and say, repeat that or reword it or ask more questions that will help you understand what it is that I do. So what do I do? Well, I have to question that myself. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I've ended up almost the more you know, that you realize the less you know. And I've been doing healing work for about 25 years. I started as a craniosacral therapist in 1997. I've studied with Dr. Upledger. He's the father of craniosacral therapy. I did that up to about 2005, where I then specialized with babies and horses. I moved that way because I've got a background in horses, and I found working with adults a bit hard work, to be quite honest. I found that the process of healing and people taking on the opportunity of their own healing process, particularly with some adults, was actually very draining. It was more like, you're the therapist, you're the healer, you heal me. So it's like, without making any change for themselves. So I was getting a bit tired of that. So I ended up taking the equine and the pediatric courses. The two things they say never work with, right, is animals and kids, and they're the two things I work with. And to hold these beautiful babies in such trauma after birth, because all birth is traumatic and beautiful too, right, but that compression and stretching that they go through, and then the colic aspects and all the other bits and pieces, to have them in my hands and to be able to offer what I thought was craniosacral therapy, which actually I now realize is actually hands-on healing. We'll look more at that in a moment. So in 1999 I created Wildflower co-creatively with nature itself. And that's been a whole journey that we can explore further.
Sorry, Wildflower Essences.
Wildflower Essences, yeah, sorry, Wildflower Essences. And that's a whole journey in itself into the nature realms and working more closely with nature. And a big part of my healing work is trying to turn people onto nature and to work more closely with nature, because surely nature is at the heart of all of our healing processes. So how can we access that? How can I bring that into my healing space? So we can look more at that in a bit. Also, I do remote healing. Remote healing is distant healing. I call it remote healing because I'm studying remote viewing. I don't know if anyone has heard of that. That again, that's another discussion that we can have a look at. But that remote healing actually has undone my whole clinical background of craniosacral therapy. I don't know if anyone knows about cranial osteopathy or craniosacral therapy. The osteopaths have coined the cranial work for their work. They initially created that through their schools, though osteopathy stands by itself. The British Osteopathic Council don't recognise cranial osteopathy as osteopathy. It's an add-on. Dr. Upledger in the 1970s then started to pull away from cranial osteopathy and started craniosacral therapy. And for those who know, will know probably, and maybe you're studying it too, and forgive me if I, well, maybe it will put out your fire, maybe it will ignite your fire, I don't know, but the basis is this rhythm inside our bodies, which they communicate initially, well, they did back in the 90s, that it's a fluid in the nervous system, cerebral spinal fluid. And this fluid expands out through the membrane system, well, it stays within the membrane system, but as a rhythm. And this rhythm they call the craniosacral rhythm. That rhythm, with all the other techie clinical aspects of what we do, I've now discovered through remote craniosacral therapy or remote healing. I don't know if I can even call myself remote craniosacral therapist anymore, because that hub, that rhythm is not coming from cerebral spinal fluid. It can't be. If I'm sitting here in South Africa and treating my clients in America or treating my clients in New Zealand, what's happening? What is that? It's totally changed my aspect of reality, but also my work. So I deep dived into it, and then I realized that in 1890, Dr. Still, the father of osteopathy, interesting, his name's Dr. Still, in the craniosacral rhythm, or the breath of life, or this healing rhythm, there's a still point. And in that still point, it's the healing that comes out of that. Curious, his name was Dr. Still. So back in the 1890s, he was fascinated by Native American healing arts, and so he went to study with them. And that's what is craniosacral therapy, or this rhythm, this healing. It's Native American healing arts, right? And so he then showed that to his students in the 1930s in America. They were getting really techie, and there was lots of grants given to people who could really bring this stuff forward and make it very clinical. So the osteopaths did a great job with that. Dr. Sutherland, a real technician, pulls the cranium apart, sees that the skull is articulating and all of these different other aspects to it. And then Dr. Upledger, through an operation in the 70s, was helping on a spinal operation, and found that he couldn't hold a certain segment. The main doctor who was telling him to keep it still, he couldn't, and that's where he started to propose that this fluid is the rhythm itself. But it can't be if we're doing it from a distance. So what is this? What is this rhythm that we're feeling? Well, when you look more into the esoteric aspects of life, there is these expanding and contracting forces, the positive expansion and the negative contraction. These forces seem to be within life. Some people call it the breath of life. These are the things that we use for the remote healing aspect. I call it remote healing or distant. And I'm finding that I can pick up the same things as I would if my hands were on your ankles. So you've got to start asking, well, what is this? What is this? Is there distance between ourselves? We start looking at quantum aspects, right? And so now I promote myself more as a remote healer than actually a craniosacral therapist, though that gives me a good basis. And when you're in the more clinical aspects, yes, you can talk all that clinical stuff and membrane systems and all of these different things that kind of give it gravitas. But that in itself seems to be an impediment to actually how to move forward with that work. So that's the sort of that's the remote healing that's opened up this whole other aspect. So it's communication, right? Communication between myself and my clients from way over where. Seems like distance isn't distance anymore, right? So how does that work, right? So this communication aspect is really, really important. And we can look into that in more detail. But the hub of what we both do, and I suspect a lot of what's in your hearts too, is your own interest in how to deepen your connection with communicating with nature. I think nature right now is ringing the bell louder than ever, or maybe we're hearing it. Maybe she's been ringing it all this time, and now we're hearing it. Maybe, unfortunately, through the ecological, or maybe not. We don't quite know. But that's what these astral structures are that we work with, and we want to present to you. And we're teaching that this weekend. We've got another one on the 22nd of February. That's on Saskia's website that we can come and have a look at. So what are these things that we... Sorry,
before we
me.
get into that,
I'm on a roll.
You are, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious of is when you talk about the remote healing, and you mentioned that you were studying remote viewing.
Yeah.
Before we get to the astral structures and the role that might play in it, can you speak a little bit to the remote viewing and why?
Thank you. Anyone heard of remote viewing? Oh, you see, I told you you're like a enlightened bunch, right? So remote viewing, the little I know about it is that it's like psychic spies, right? You know, when people talked about this moons ago, I feel quite awkward talking about it because I've judged other people for it, right? So when you judge people, you've got 3 back at yourself. I got 3 back at myself right now with this. So I thought, the remote viewing I'm doing, I heard about the remote healing I'm doing. I heard about remote viewing. I'm speaking to a friend of mine who came to stay. He then, on the plane going back to Scotland, just so happened, was sitting by somebody who teaches it in Inverness, which is round the corner for me. So I know nothing really about it. I'd had a book that for many years. I hadn't even read it. And it seems to be that the CIA, the secret governments, the intelligence agencies of Russia and America have used psychic spies to view what's going on behind enemy lines, right? And they would use map coordinates as a way to anchor in to those places. And Harvard created this very amazing system that allows you to almost, with the coordinates, project yourself through quantum to these places, and then these really cool questions that it's almost like once you're on site, it's like an iris, and the more questions they ask, the bigger the iris becomes, the more information, and then next thing you know, you're viewing this site. You can fly around the site. You can start interacting with people on the site. I haven't got there yet, right? But the remote healing side of it it couples in with that. So I'm still studying once a month with one of the students, and we're practicing this. And so an example would be we go onto a certain website. There's 8-digit numbers, and I don't know what's behind those numbers. She doesn't know what's behind those numbers. And she then is the monitor. She keeps me on track. We go through this system, and then we pull up the picture. And we see how close we are to the picture, to the numbers to the picture that we are with what we've seen. And that can produce some remarkable insights into what's going on with that. I'm using that to sharpen that ability, but also it's fascinating to see what we can do. But it's not just for remote healing. It's not just for our friend uses it for search and rescue. The people I'm staying with, I said, I've got some remote viewing this weekend, and what's that? And so I explained it rather sheepishly, and oh yeah, we use that. What for? Search and rescue. Somebody local. They used somebody. The police force used somebody to find out from the eyes of the person of where they were. They gave all the detail. Sadly, they couldn't find the person. They abseiled everywhere. They found all these different things, and then they found the person in the cave, and then from the cave out was exactly what they saw. So I have a client who's in the army. He was SAS. He said he feels that every special forces uses remote viewing. So it's this almost this secret that is out there that if you Google it, if you go online, you'll see, and it's pretty professional outfits. It's not out there stuff. So
What's the difference between remote viewing and astral projection, in your opinion?
So I think that I'm not too sure. I haven't come through this as a sort of astral projection. Does that sound the same?
To me, there's a subtle difference. I'm not an expert in the field, so I'm not sure, but what I would say is that remote viewing is that you are setting your consciousness to be perceiving in a particular area, whereas astral projection, it's almost like you're sending your astral body there. So there's almost like a separation that happens, which can be more dangerous than the remote viewing. But then I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe, you know, we're traveling the curious frontiers here, aren't we?
Yeah,
You know?
we are.
And but maybe it's using that astral structure, those astral lights, those strains of energy, maybe in the same way. Maybe that my body is using that astral light, that astral energy to project in that way. Whenever people have talked about astral projection, that's always freaks me out. That's the last thing I want to do, right? I'm quite happy here in my body, and you know, but it may be similar. It may be similar.
Well, either way, it brings to mind an interesting question of what is the astral? Maybe we can touch on that, because it's not always obvious to people.
Yeah.
Before we talk about astral structures, what is the astral?
Yeah.
And how would, even if we don't know exactly how astral projection works.
What is the astral, right?
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I experience things and then I try and study about them. So doing the remote healing or the remote viewing, I sort of try it first. So what is it, right? So I mean, and you guys might have some other ideas too, but it seems to be there is no distance, right? There is no past, there is no future, there is no now. It's just one big stream of energy, right? Just creating whatever life is on it. So if we can somehow ride that, what is that? Is it quantum? What's that? Well, they don't even know themselves. And every time they you know, I'm reading up about it, there's something else that they're not too sure about. But let's just call it quantum energy. It seems to be this life force that everything is stuck into, out of. Maybe the flower of life is that symbol that energy comes out of and form. But there's something about the space between me and you. There is no space. There is no nothing. There's something between us. So whatever that is, let's just call it a big pool of energy, quantum energy. And I think it's what our interaction with it is then what we do, whether it's astral projection, whether it's spiral bridge, astral structures. And whatever that energy is seems to interact with us, right? It seems to be conscious or not. It's the way we are interacting with it. So intent, imagination, are really cool bits of kit that we call just the imagination. We kind of pulled it, you know what I mean? But actually, the imagination is a really cool piece of kit that we can use to connect with that energy, that astral energy. And intent is a curious thing, right? I don't know if I suspect lots of people have done a shamanic journeying and drumming, right? 99% of journeying is the intention. What is your intention? When I do the healing work, I need to get permission from the individual to work with, because once they've said yes, and you must ask, you've got to ask, because then you get the quantum entanglement. So look, I'm no academic on this, but these words seem to be able to satisfy the cynic in me about this stuff, and then creating these astral structures that we're going to talk more about, seem to then enhance what it is that we want to use them for. So nature, can we then apply that to nature? Absolutely. And do they work? Well, from my own experience, I feel that they do. But again, my healthy skeptic and my healthy cynic has to challenge that.
So what is an astral structure? You were going to mention early on, and I decided to go on a bit of a side quest.
Yes, that was me. Let me go on a side quest.
We both went on a side quest.
So what is an astral structure? So say this right? I'm just trying to figure this out myself, right? I'm not an academic. I'm experiential. And so if we look at the quantum energy that is around us, our intent, our imagination, our focus into it creates magic. Magic works, right? From a Catholic upbringing, that just sent the shivers down me when I first realised that. But I've worked through that, so it's okay, right? So, I think. So I think that the astral structure is something that we can manifest. We're manifestors, right? Yeah, has anyone done Shakti Gawain's creative visualization? Yeah, right. It's an old book, but that stuff works. you get that right, you get the visualization, you nail it with the system that she does, and you do it in the morning and you do it at night, and you put the date and the finish date, that stuff works. Doesn't work with the relationships. It seems to go pear-shaped. Seems to attract, but then there's something quite not right. But so just, trust me on that. But for manifesting health or abundance or work, it can really do that with, right? So astral structures seem to be the structural form that we use, almost like the vehicle that we use to be able to then access the magic and whatever we want to do with it. So that's my sense of it. I hope that kind of makes sense.
The way it does to me, and what comes to mind is that it's a form of technology that we can be using, techniques as well as technology, so that if we think of something like a geodesic dome as an example of a structure, you can create that with your imagination, and on an energetic level use that to also create safety, for example, program it to have a particular kind of filter to achieve a certain aim aligned with your vision and mission of a certain space, for example, for your project, for a short-term endeavor, anything like that. So
you can meditate in them, we made an essence in them, you can be inspired in them, you can create your own healing team in them. It seems to create a clear and healthy boundary between you and the outside, if we can call it that. It sort of ekes out in this energy, in this quantum, almost a sterile space. So therefore, when you do healing or you do make essences, say for instance, whatever then you invite into that space is only that signature, is only that energy. So when we were doing Yellowwood the other day, we invited the spirit of Yellowwood to come into this, the spiral bridge. This is the astral structures that I teach or share. And then we know it's, apart from the co-creative aspects of that stabilize it, we can look more at that, but that's what we're going to teach in the workshop, how to set that up, how to stabilize it. But what that means is that when we use it for nature communication, it's just that, it was just Yellowwood in there. There was no influences from the outside. Nothing can come into that space by the cosmic law of free will, and unless I invited it, that's not an ego thing, it's a safety thing. And there is etiquette out there in the energy worlds, and particularly if you focus in on that, then you attract that, right? So the astral structure is this really magical space. It's a funky space that you can create anything you want within it, and then invite the spirits of nature to come into it. So it's almost like the imagination with intent sets up, manifests it. And our friend Emma Fitchett calls it astral light.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So we have a mutual friend, Emma Fitchett, who previously was known as Emma Farrell, and some of you might have attended her talk at Kwendalo 2 years ago. Was it last year or was it 2 years ago? But she was here, so you might remember her. And she also works, like both of us, with the consciousness of plants. And what I learned from her was using the astral structure of the Celtic cross, which is actually not just what you would imagine what the Celtic cross looks like in 2D, but it's a sphere. So that's something that I would use in my work that I learned from her as a structure that creates a container within which I would do energetic clearings. So there are many different traditions and cultures around the world that use astral structures. Like the Merkaba, for example, would be one. Celtic cross would be another. I can't think of offhand of any others. But music, for example, also creates structures. Music is sacred geometry made audible, right? And a lot of architecture could be thought of, and our bodies as well could be sacred geometry made visible. So they are in themselves, in my opinion, also astral structures. But when it's filtered out into the physical, when it kind of condenses into the physical, then you can engage with it. But because our eyes, our physical eyes, can only see 0.05 or something % of the whole of the electromagnetic spectrum, we cannot see the astral structures unless we're switching on that kind of vision. And we have some people here today or who are professional psychics, so they can do that. And I remember sitting in Emma's house when she was living in Wales and looking up and just being like, what am I seeing above me? And I curiously, but not necessarily intending to see anything, just like sometimes I do that because it's not always on automatically. And I saw a geodesic dome over her house. And I said, did you put up a geodesic dome over her house? And she said, I'm surprised you can see that. You're the first person who's ever mentioned that. Yes, I have, because that's one of the layers of protection that I put over the house. And there are others as well, but I chose not to look because that could be considered psychic trespass. Which brings me on to another topic, which is the uses of astral structures can also be, like we mentioned, around clarity, safety, energetic safety and psychic hygiene. Within that clarity, you can also protect yourself against psychic attacks, psychic trespass, if you know how to use them. Now, some people would say you could do that even without training, and that's true. But of course, training helps, as with almost anything in this world. So I'm curious, Paul, did you learn how to work with astral structures from people, or was it something that you learned directly from the intelligence of nature?
Yeah, I thank you. There was a couple of other people that I learned how, that I experienced astral structures with. Michelle Smallwright, she's from
she's the founder of Perelandra.
Yeah. She's got, she uses conings, co-creative agreement, similar. Jill Patterson, a fellow South African, who the Palladian Light Body DNA activation program. She's now changed her name to Amrita Melchizedek, but a fellow South African. She is using these astral structures. So I got to experience them first, but they were set up differently.
Yeah.
That different with the Celtic cross. You guys know what the Celtic cross is? It's like the cross with a circle. Yeah. So when you did that with Emma, did that shape itself give a certain signature to it, a certain vibration to it? And was it spherical?
It wasn't automatically spherical to begin with for me, because she would say use a Celtic cross, but I didn't know diddly squat about what that means.
Yeah.
And then she would explain to me it's not a 2D thing that you put when you're working with, let's say, with the Celtic medicine wheel, with the cardinal directions of east and south and west and north associated with different elements. And you can overlay the cross over that, but it's not just a flat thing, because you've also got above, below, and inside. So you create this bubble with the cross being in all of the directions. And because it's got those rounded edges, it becomes, and you can change it, edit it however feels right for you, that then becomes the holding pattern within which you can work and is very powerful. Additionally, I will spin mine. So once it's set up, then I'll put a spin on it that makes it even more difficult to interfere with from outside things, and then other layers and things that I do with it as well.
Okay, so there. I mean, it's co-creative. It's really creative what we can do. Emma uses towers, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And in the astral structure, in the astral world, imagination, intent, creating these different layers, and then she'll go through different layers to then access different elements or wisdom or healing. And the Perelandra, Jill Patterson, they were using cones of light on top of their auric field. So all of these are astral structures. For me, I call it spiral bridge, because it's actually a spiral. It's a logarithmic spiral, and the logarithmic spiral is a spiral that's, as it spins out, it gets faster, and the spaces in between get bigger. And that came from, I didn't learn that came from a journey of working with the spirit behind Wildflower. There were two spirits I worked with. One, I see things in orbs when I connect to spirits. And I was in Glastonbury at the time, which is a big hub, a big spiritual hub in Britain. And when I was hanging out there, these two orbs came to me. One was a blue one was a green one. And the green one, I'm going to call Evelyn. Well, she's Evelyn from Avalon. And she and her and I, she taught me how to make the essences. We grew together, we worked together and made all the essences that we did. But the blue bean, I thought, was the communication diva. So we've got lots of divas for lots of different things, right? It's kind of animism. I know you like the animism, right? And I didn't realize that blue diva actually, after coming through Wildflower and working with me, and because it's about communication, and the whole thing is working with the essences about how to communicate, how to bridge the spirits, their healing, into my healing practice, that this blue bean introduced the Wildflower Oracle, which was an intuitive way of creating a bridge between ourselves and the essences. So to intuitively choose the essences. So traditionally, and I know in certain batch flower teachings, they teach you not to do that and to be more prescriptive. And I had a whole box of essences in my clinic space. I closed myself off to anybody else. It was before the internet came around. I wanted to experience them first before I read about anyone else again, right? It's a harder way, but I think it's a more genuine way for me. And in that space, the development of the essences was one level of communication. The oracle was a different level, and it came out of me working with my clients, and this rhythm, not the craniosacral rhythm, this expanding, contracting rhythm that's coming out of their body, which now we can talk to. It gives us a yes and no. Maybe it's where pendulum and kinesiology comes from. Was responding favourably to a certain remedy in my box. I could get this flash of, it was a lesser celandine, this beautiful yellow flower. And so I would take the remedy and put it on the person's body. If the rhythm stops, then that's a point of significance. So the person needed this remedy. So I said to the person, hey, would you like to take this remedy? And she said, what was it for? And I told her what it was for. She's like, oh my God, how do you know that? And so 7 years I took to proof my essences in my clinic in that way, and wow. that led me to this oracle, which is using flower cards and intuitive processes. So you ask the question, you get drawn to the flowers, and then you see what the message is. That led me to see that they are guides, and they are guides, they are teachers, and they are healers. They guide you through intuition to the remedy. They teach you because of what it's for, and then they heal you. So now this relationship with nature and the spirits is now coming forward from the blue bean that came through this. Yeah. Then the blue bean took it further, which is, how can we get you guys, us, even deeper into nature? How can we get you individually to go out into nature without a bottle, without the knowledge of how to make an essence? And you too connect to the essence, to the nature in this way. So this blue bean, then I discovered, wasn't the communication diva at all. It was the she. They call it the she in Scotland, or the Siddhi. Yeah. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I've met them.
Yeah, so you've met them?
Yeah, in Ireland they're known as the Tuatha Danann, and they are considered to be the indigenous beings of Ireland and Wales and the rest of Britain, before the Celts even. And according to the Mabinogion, they decided, because they had the technology to wipe out the Celts when they invaded, rather than wiping them out, they decided to incorporate their magic, which became the basis of the Druid magic.
Absolutely, yeah.
And many of the stone circles are considered to be portals through which you can still communicate with them, and had the very great honour of being introduced to them in South Wales at Gors 4 stone circle, just on the foot of the Preseli Hills, which is where the blue stones for Stonehenge come from, and were taken all the way across to Somerset. So it was really bizarre to feel that interaction and to get that first-hand experience.
So they're blue beans, right? Yeah. And the green beans, Evelyn from Avalon, she's more the Fae. So these nature spirits were coming through that work, and then the spiral came through the connection of the Druids. So I've been studying with OBOD, Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, for the last 12 years. It's just ongoing. I've completed the Bardic grade, the Ovate grade, they were the healers, and then the Druid grade I'm in now. And it was then connecting back into the earth, back into my indigenous earth, to the British pre-Christian spiritual heritage. Alleluia, we've got something like that. I was chiming more with Native American Indian or indigenous aspects, but it wasn't from my land. I went to Asia and did the Buddhist thing and Hindu thing, but I'm so pleased to have found that. And so it was the blue beans, and maybe that's the blue Buddha, the medicine Buddha. Maybe that's Krishna. There's something about the blue beans, right, that are in life, that really are here as amazing teachers. So it was working with the she through this. I had to have initiation with them that came through a journey, and then they're like, right, use this technology. I'm like, how do you use it? Well, let's give it a go. So we create this teepee-like shape, and we create the co-creative agreement. We put it into the astral place, and that's why I was asking you about the Celtic cross, because this, different from the cones that the other guys are using, different from the Celtic cross, the blimmin' spiral seems to amplify what we're doing, right? The information that comes through, it's like, if you look at homeopathy and flower essences, when you dilute it, the stronger it gets. Though there's a bit of thing with essences, the more you dilute it, it can drop off. But with homeopathy, it doesn't. So what is that? It's like energetic digestion. It's too concentrated in the mother tincture. So we put it into stock bottle and then dosage bottle. Yeah. So we open it up. What the spiral itself does, the information that comes through the top of the teepee-like shape, right? It's this big teepee-like shape right at the top. You've got two key elements, characters, the overlighting diva of healing and the green man. We can talk about them. And what traditionally people would say their higher self. Because I follow the Druid path, I call it my oak sage self. And I place him there. That pinnacle, that point, spinning in an anti-clockwise way, will create a positive spin, this spin on spin. Now we're looking at torsion physics, with astrophysics uses these things to look at torsion fields, subtle energies, gravity, subtle energy.
Which is what Terence Howard talks about in that, what you were describing.
Yeah, that behind energy, behind the neutron and the proton and the electron, are this what's behind energy? Are these spirals, interlocking spirals, spinning in counterclockwise ways. Yeah. So there's magic in that, right? And that's this quantum stuff that we're working with. So when I asked the spirit of oak to come through that space, the spiral itself seems to disseminate those, call it light, that information. So by the time it gets to little old me down here, it's more energetic digestible. So the actual spiral, the spiral itself diffuses information.
So firstly, just to repeat the question for the sake of the recording, the question was, were you born with this, if I can summarize it? Were you born with this? Or is it something that you can learn? Is it something that anybody can learn? So I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah, so No, it's great. No, it's and right on. It has to be like this, guys, because this isn't. I don't think academia could even answer these things, right? So, from my experience, and that's a really good question, because I do have something, yes, and that's been from a young age. I think we've all got something. I've just been working it for 25 years with my work, right? So, if you were to come on the workshop, you could set up one of these structures, absolutely, and it would be practice and how fit you can get with it. And so I think we all have that ability, but depending on our background, depending on what shops we've been shopping in, actually might then suppress it and our beliefs. To step into this place, right, and to present it like this, I feel awkward because I've judged. Right? So I got 3 back at myself, but I couldn't sit here unless it was real. So to fine tune your question, I believe that if your will and your intent and you've got imagination and you can access that, yes, I think you can. We've got to manage expectations because everyone's going to be at different levels. But yes, everyone can do it. I just got a bit of a head start. That's all.
And now for me to add on to that, I didn't grow up being able to do this. I came from a very straight-laced, conventional background, knew from the age of 6 that I was going to be a scientist. And I believed that was the way that I was going to save the world. And decided that that anything else was just floofy, woo, airy-fairy.
Hey, airy fairy, steady. I'm airy fairy. We do the fairies.
I am now too. As a recovering academic, I have finally crossed over.
Speaking up for the fairies, yeah.
But it took me getting to PhD level, going to a workshop on animal communication, having my own experiential evidence that this is real. Neither of us expect you to believe anything we say just off face value. The invitation is get your own evidence, and it has to be embodied and experiential, which is why on the 22nd of February we have this workshop that Paul's going to teach to share this technology of the spiral bridge as one example of energetic structures or astral structures. So it is transferable as a skill, but it took me a long time to get to that point, to acknowledge it, and I believe that because I came from a straight-laced academic background, it took me longer. It's the same like if you were to go and do movement medicine or conscious dance or 5 rhythms, somebody with a formal dance training background finds it a bit more difficult sometimes to let go of a certain position that they've had with their body for a long time, a method, a way of being and thinking and moving, which I can tell you now, because you are human, you are nature, this is something you are born with, whether it's nature communication, whether it's designing astral structures, whether it's using ordinary everyday magic. This is a form of magic, and you have that capacity. It's an innate ability that it's just up to you to reclaim that power.
Yeah.
Right. Rah.
Who was with me?
Yeah, fairies.
So we had another question in the back there. I wish that you had a microphone, because that is a beautiful soundbite. The world is a different place to what it was 30 years ago. The fact that you are here means that you can, and it's a matter of choosing. Sorry, I'm summarizing, but beautifully said. Thank you.
Yeah, there are different Euclidean spiral, the logarithmic spiral, the different types of spirals. The logarithmic spiral is more akin to our physical bodies, with all manner of stuff that we've got, which we look more into the workshop. But yeah, so you'd have to look at what the very patterns that you're creating in physical form will have an astral structure. Yes. So it's then what you, with the intent that you've built your house on and your garden, that will then give them that energy. You're infusing this quantum into that space. But yeah, it would be, we can chat more about that and the different types of spirals. Yeah.
Paul, if I can just ask, do you teach Spiral Bridge also online? I know that you're working with Emma.
Yeah, it's nice to do it in person. But yes, I do, and one-on-one or in classes, yeah. Logarithmic. It's the one that goes, as it starts from its point, it gets further and further away, the spaces in between, and it speeds up. So it's the speed of it, as opposed to the Euclidean one, which is just one static movement and the spaces in between stay the same. The logarithmic one speeds it up. It seems like it spins the light, spins the information and diffuses it so it's more digestible. Yeah, and just to come back to you, have you ever had that inclination, like, oh, you just thought of someone and then they phone? Yeah. There you go, you're in, you're doing it.
I charge 1,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want 20%. So these are magical things, right? And we can do it. We can connect with these things. And that's what we're trying to share.
I have a question, one more, if you can share your experiences when you speak about the spiral bridge, your perception. So like Saskia spoke about opening, to psychic sight of the astral shapes and structures. How do you sense them? Because I know one can also feel them sometimes. You can physically feel the energetic form. Is it imaginal? Is it seen?
Yeah, so like, do you see it, feel it, hear it? Yeah, so the clairvoyant, the astral structures, spiral bridges, helps you develop that. Because how do you develop that, right? With one, keeping it in a safe space. And the spiral bridge allows that to happen. But then it gives you the arena. It's almost like a gymnasium that then you can figure out what's your strength and where to develop and what to develop. We've all got something, right? Normally it's feel, right? I felt first, but then I started making essences, and then I could hear. That freaked me out because I was like, my God, I'm hearing voices. And that was Bluebell. Bluebell, apparently there's an old folk saying back in the UK, if you fall asleep in a bluebell wood, you wake up mad. And it's because you can hear the voices, right? And so yeah, we all have something, and then there's like a clear cognition, right? There's other aspects. So we've all got something, and the spiral bridge is like a gymnasium for us to work them out, so we can then connect even deeper with nature. That's what we're doing here, right? Is to be able to connect more deeply in nature through these structures. So my visual cortex has gone very large when I treat. So when I treat horses, I laugh because I've judged people, I've judged. Do you know? Damn it. So I work with the spirit herd. So this is a shamanic approach of requesting the spirit herd to come in. So they all come in into my spiral bridge. I have to make it quite big. And they all stand around in the circle. And then with permission, I ask for the spirit of the horse to come into my spiral bridge. They normally come in a certain place for some reason, whatever, they come in. And then I watch. And they may limp. They may come in rocking. They may have their head low. And I write all that down. And then they come over to me, and then I use a color chart. I did this when I did hands-on work. When I do hands-on with horses, I say to horse, hey, in my mind, but hey, look, I've got this color thing going on, yeah? Use dark or black colors to show me density, but the lighter colors to show where it's okay. So I see black there, and I see blue there, and I start doing this little map. And they're like, well, you're going to sell that, they say. You know, I know this is what I'm doing, right? Then I look at vectors, which is these energy lines coming off. So I open up the visual cortex, and then I write all that down. Then I put my hands on and use the rhythm to figure out what's going on. So that visual cortex is opened up hugely because of the work in spiral bridges. So yeah, they can help develop from the start to wherever you want to take it. Then I phone up the owner because I don't know why they're there, right? I've got to challenge myself. I've got to show you that I've got something, because when the healing comes in, because it can be quite fantastical. It grounds it, because if he sees that, then the healing has more gravitas. So then I phoned the guys up. I said, yeah, your horse is doing this, your horse is doing, and they're like, that is exactly how the horse is moving.
And so you're going in blind, you're working remotely, you have a picture of the horse?
I have a picture of the horse, the name, its age, and that's the anchor, yeah.
Yes.
That's the entanglement, right? And then they start talking, right? You know that, they start talking. It's like how they got into that position. And sheepishly you go back, not so sheepish now, but sheepishly you go back and you tell them, and yeah, it's right on, it happened in this way, or it happened in that way. And if they have the gumption to communicate with you, you have to then communicate that back to the owner, because that's totally disrespectful. And next time you go back in working with horse, they're like, yeah, I'm not talking to you, you're not talking to anyone. So you have to do that. It's a curious frontier working with animals in that way.
It is.
Yeah.
Can I ask quick, tiny side quest? When you are working with horses, and even maybe babies, how do I put this? The way that the healing comes through, is it related just to the horse or to the baby? Or is there also more going on with the family system, with the people associated with the horses?
That's the constellation aspect.
Yes.
Yeah, so the intent is to focus on the horse. So that's the focus. Yeah. But the horse is then telling me about something that it was scared of outside. The horse is telling me that the rider's doing something. So you can, but I think the constellation work that you do, you kind of broaden that scope, don't you? You're able to broaden that horizon.
Well, it's often in the communication that comes up, and I know this also with other animal communicators, that very often the animals want to share more about what's going on for their people, because that's often where more of the blocks occur. And so the horses are being these very strong mirrors of, can you please address this issue, because either there's not awareness or ignorance or deliberate ignorance or not willingness to look at that, and that's creating issues within the family system that includes the animals. Yeah. So that was kind of what I wanted to address, is like how much of the healing also filters to the rest of the family system. I don't know if you can even address that.
Yeah, no, sure. So there's particularly a horse, Merlin, his name is, and he sees his owner as part of the herd. So whatever she's going through, he's picking up. And so I'm working on the horse, and it's the same issues as she's going through, and she's got a right paranoia about it. It's like, it's okay, he's okay with it. So yes, it sort of indirectly you can. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But again, it's curious the intent of what you're doing, because then that opens up the lens. Is it the same with remote viewing, right? It's the same thing. The constellation work that you do, I get a sense it's a broader horizon. Maybe you can pull in, well, it's a constellation, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of anybody who's not familiar with what we're talking about with constellations, part of the work that I have done, is family constellations. So classically trained in family constellations, also do nature and land constellations. And what constellations is another shamanic approach, which was designed by Bert Hellinger, who was a German psychotherapist, who worked with people in Tanzania and in South Africa, specifically with the Zulu people, and learned how to use approaches that include more of the family system than just the person or the people within a family unit, a family of origin, and to include the ancestors, to include the unseen, and you can work in a way that doesn't have to have everybody present. I have a number of reservations around working with constellations, mainly because I don't agree with including somebody in a constellation who is alive and isn't aware of their energy being called into the field. That for me constitutes psychic trespass, so I work in a slightly different way. But the long and the short of it is that constellations is a methodology that allows you to reveal the unknown. It creates a living map, whether it's using people or whether it's using objects to represent elements of a family system. And so it's been done now for many decades. It's become very popular worldwide. People are trained. It's almost like what one of my teachers and friends calls shamanism by numbers. So it doesn't deliberately always include the ritual aspect of it, which I think is really important. Working with astral structures to make sure, or energetic containers, if you will, to make sure that whatever work happens within the space is actually clear. It has the intention of making sure that everybody's well-being, highest and deepest well-being, is looked after, and not just assuming that it is because the field is all knowable and wise, and one can assume that, and that can be enough to program it, but not always. So this is where the work that I've done with nature communication then really helps, is being able to apply communication, which includes also having psychic vision, which I've developed over a few years, and everybody can too. It's using that to, in addition to the refined observation you have of the physical elements of people, representatives in the system, that makes it more holistic and more efficient and effective.
Mm-hmm. And so that then you're working with astral light again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That psychic trespassing. Do you guys know what we're talking about when we say that, psychic trespassing? That's it's just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? I've got a client of mine. It's like, can you work with my husband? Well, have you asked him? No, he just needs the healing. I can't work with him.
Yeah, that crosses an ethical boundary in our work.
It's what? Say again?
Crosses an ethical boundary.
Yeah, right.
Not necessarily. Sometimes in family constellation, it has to do with that person's energy interfering with the person that's being healed. So you're not necessarily going to be asking the person who doesn't have clean, ethical intentions to come and bring that energy into the space that you're trying to remove that energy from.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good point. And actually, in that case, this is up to the different facilitators. I would then, because you can ask for permission for the highest self of that person who's doing the interfering to be brought in and to address that. But if you don't have permission to bring them in, then a different approach is needed. So this is where energetic clearings can also come in. But I'm just aware that we're kind of mushrooming into various different fields.
Can I just put something in there too, though? So maybe this is coming from a healing perspective, as I'm embracing the healer now, and not the craniosacral therapist. Is that it's a curious thing what we're saying there? It's that psychic attack, say, right, coming from the outside. So when I think just on this point, it's really, really important. And again, this is only my experience, right, of it, is that looking at psychic attack is coming from someone else's pain body, right, into that person that you're speaking to. My approach would be, is that that person needs to sort themselves out, and you need to create a clear and healthy boundary around the individual and heal the individual for where the chink is in their armor for allowing it in.
Yes.
So now you don't even need to talk to the other person. You don't even, so psychic trespassing is what that person's done, but we need to be careful that we're not doing the same thing when we're trying to clear that.
Absolutely.
Because what we're doing is creating almost an energetic slagging match between ourselves and the other person. So when I've experienced psychic attack, I understand that. But so you armor up. So you put the mirrors up and you send things back and you decode it and you get this big battle. You get Archangel Michael in there and the shield and the sword, and it becomes an energetic slagging match, right? And so from my experience, I'm not saying I'm right, just that the approach I've taken is that when I do my healing work, I see that stuff in the energy field. And traditionally you see it like suckers and like really demonic stuff, and I clear that stuff with all that big fight, and the client would still come back. And then you try and close it off and sort the other person, and it still come back. So I go eyeball what that is. What is this? So I go eyeball it, and it's snarling and it's evil. And however nasty it looks is the reflection of the person's own pain body. So that needs healing.
Sometimes they did, those people.
So then that's where psychopump, for example, and ancestral healing comes in.
Yes.
And then that's part of energetic clearing work, which can be done for the individual. So
sorry to interrupt. I want to take responsibility that I don't want to make it.
No, but it's a good point. It's a good point, though.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
To the comment that people now know what wasn't known 30 years ago. This is ancient old.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
So and I think that there's so many layers and different ways of working with this, and perhaps it's not the moment. And I apologize to have brought it,
Oh,
but
no,
I think it's important.
no, I
it's
think
so
it's
good
important.
that you did bring it.
Yeah, because it's really important, because otherwise how do we heal it?
Yeah.
Because that energetic slagging match is something. So now I go to that place and we work with it. We see the chink in the person's armor. We heal that. That person doesn't experience the psychic attack, and we haven't needed to go near the other person. Actually, it's helped heal that other person by not getting into that battle. I'm not saying that you're doing that.
You're disarming though. If someone has weapons against you, you don't have to necessarily
Battle it.
fight with
No,
them.
don't.
Disarm them.
Yeah, heal the person who's experiencing it.
Yes.
Then they become strong, and then they don't need to come back. They don't need to come back.
This is important to be aware of, that healing is a complex approach.
Yeah.
And so this is one aspect of how one can heal. In my energetic clearing work, I'm basically a glorified garbage person. And my lens is to always look for the things that are toxic or harmful. So then I tend to go a lot around, energetic safety and psychic hygiene, because I found that that's really important around clarity. And so much of that can be maybe not bypassed, because I want to avoid using that word, because we don't want to just bypass stuff, but could be avoided if we were to keep ourselves clearer in our energy field to begin with, which is what the technology that you use
a clear and healthy
does.
boundary, isn't it?
Yeah, clear and healthy boundary. That's the soundbite.
Yeah.
That's what an astral structure can be
Because
used for.
words are spells, right? So protection you're going to attract attack. So creating clear and healthy boundaries, that's health. And so in those times where people are experiencing that, you'll see a wound inside the person who is experiencing it. So that's what I experienced, healed that inside myself, and this guy couldn't touch me anymore. Actually, it kind of dominoed back to him, and he doesn't come trouble me anymore. So there's something really healing in that, as long as we look for the health in these things.
So it's what you were saying of taking, and I know it's a different context, but taking responsibility first for where are we allowing that to happen, if possible.
Yeah, where we allowing it. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which sometimes is not conscious. Sometimes we need help. In the same way that I talk about it like this: I can brush my teeth, and I can floss, and I can do the oil pulling, and I can do the hydrogen peroxide and the everything. But if I fail to get all the bits, I'm going to get cavities, and then it does mean I have to go to a dentist. So sometimes we do need to go to a professional, no matter how clean we keep ourselves. And that's the role that people like ourselves and others do, is to maintain clear and healthy boundaries.
floss out the energy.
Energetic flossing.
No, sorry.
Sometimes we just need help doing that.
Yeah, I hope I'm going to answer this right. Is that first, it's a cornerstone. Not people, you might not like this. I've had clients walk out on me when I've said this. Is that we are totally 100% in control of our emotional states. It doesn't seem like it at the time, right? Because they've said something, we've allowed ourselves to be hurt, or you've made me, right? So that connection that's happening, first, to create the clear and healthy boundary is to own that emotion. So when I felt that psychic attack, I didn't blame him for that. Yeah. Right? I looked at where that wounding was within myself and then able to see that. So you're right. I think there's something that is sort of opposite, or attracting each other from it, and that's where the healing is really important, to find out what that is. I hope that's answered that. But for me, that spiral journey back into the Druids, back into the land, if we look at the tombs that our ancestors had, particularly, look worldwide, right? I think what the three oldest symbols that our ancestors used was the lightning bolt, was the circle, and the dot in the middle, and then the spiral. Now, clearly they didn't have the 3D graphics that we've got. So I feel, and certainly with my journey with Wildflower, the Druids, Wildflower Essences, and the Druids, has given me this experience into that aspect, that they used it. And the spirals are used, the Maori put spirals on their tattoos, because when they die, that the spirals will protect them from something that will eat their eyes out, right? So they can get to the other side. So I think that in cultures, particularly with spiral, yes, there is a traditional aspect, and we see it through art, we see it through ritual dance, we see it through geomancy. They say that there's a spiral around, maybe considering it as the snake, around Glastonbury Tor, and that it protects earth energies. So I think very much so, but I know, just to finish that bit off, I know within the Druid aspect, they never wrote anything down. That's another wonderful subject. But yes, I think that they did. But I think you might have some more info on that.
Well, just all over the world, if we consider that the shapes and the designs that have been used, whether it's paintings on the face, you'll see it a lot in certain native tribes in the Amazon. They will use certain paints across the face to denote the 2D structure of what actually becomes 3D structures. And astral structures, in their essence, are 3D or more, like 5D as well, because it's accessing different dimensions. But sometimes just having a tattoo, or having a face paint, or having henna, or having things like your tombs and the structures of those, or having something like a Sri Yantra design, those are all pointing at the fact that they are geometries or shapes or designs that are indicating astral structures as well. Does that make sense? Yeah. See questions at the back?
Yeah, just about the shapes. So I'm just curious, when you were talking about the green man and the she-oak, what I took from that was that when you create the structure, you are bringing in guardians to that structure. So are those guardians personal? I mean, do you have anything to share about that? Like, we each have our own guardians that we would choose. Yeah. And then the second question is, I'm also curious if you found certain colors of the shapes that you're using to be more effective than others, or what color do you use when you create your shapes?
The Green Man, you guys heard of the Green Man? Okay, Green Man, the overlighting diva of healing. They can come in different names, and probably in Africa you probably got your own versions of it. It's probably the same thing, right? But through my culture, because we have a fairy culture, right? The overlighting diva of healing is the feminine healing energy, the negative as opposed to the plus. There's the plus and negative. The Green Man in our culture is the masculine healing side. But the Green Man isn't just in the Celtic culture. He spans the world, right? He's in Islam. They have the Green Man. He's called the hidden initiator of those who walk the mystical path. He is the primary mediator between the imaginary worlds and the physical worlds. Osiris was the green man. So these sort of fertility gods that are masculine in aspect. So we use those positive and negative, the male and female, in whichever way they are presented in your culture, and we place them right at the pinnacle in a triangle, and then you put your higher self or your personal self. Me, it's my oak sage self. To add, so you've got to put you've got to own it. You've got to have some part of you in there. You can't have Ganesh or Shiva because it has to be, of course you can if you set it up in that way, but we set up nature communicator spiral bridges. So we call that a co-creative agreement with nature that stabilizes it. So when you invite a client in or a horse in or a spirit in, it comes through that gate. And that gate is not programmed, but set up in such a way that it doesn't let anything else in that is not for the highest good. So it's like a gatekeeper. So that it balances the positive and negative, the male and female. And so, yeah, they're two key points. Colours, when we do the spiral bridge, and the calibration aspect, we ask for like a kind of pin code or a name and a colour to the spiral. We ask them to keep that personal because then it kind of makes it their own. But of course, colour has a certain frequency. One of my spiral bridges is deep blue, and that's very much the frequency of using it in that level. That's what's come out with this guy. The she is the deep blue. So colours will have different frequencies, in there too.
There was another question at the back.
So so they're creating that ritual that creates energy structures in the astral structure,
in the ceremony,
astral space.
The ceremonies, the shamans, I've seen them during the ceremony, but they're astral structures, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
With the songs.
Right.
Yeah.
And the women listen to the songs, and then they go and weave patterns into the cloths, the traditional cloths, and it's the representation, the geometric representation of those structures that
And if one were to chant mantras, for example, apparently that's also because it's sung, that has a frequency. The frequency will create structure, whether it's in the physical manifest realm or whether it's in the energetic realm. That also then will have an influence and interact with our energetic bodies. Yeah. One more
So
question.
that kind of weaves it back in. It's there, isn't it? It's not. This isn't new. This is ancient. This is ancient. Can I just say one thing about the yin yang? We traditionally see it as the positive and the negative, the light and the dark, the good and the evil, right? But we forget that it's in a circle, and that's the most important part of the yin yang, is that it's actually one. And I think that's what you're saying, is embracing the two, but bringing it back to one. It's an important part to put the circle within that yin yang aspect as well.
Do astral structures need updating?
Yeah, that's a curious thing. Do they need updating? I don't think they need updating, but I certainly think you can then create more from them. So, for instance, Emma Fitchett, our friend, she's using Spiral Bridge in a way that now she uses the spiral above the essences that she makes. So I don't think that I was thinking about that earlier. And it's not necessarily an update, but you can work it differently, get more creative with it. Is that an update? Maybe, yeah.
Well, maybe it's just editing it or altering it to suit yourself. But what I've found is that I've had to, the astral structures that I work with, maybe because they're not necessarily yet working at the level of the spiral bridge, but they need evolving. As I evolve, as I know better, I need to do better. So then I sit in council with my spirit team and ask what needs to change. Because I've found in the past that what I had was as effective as a wet paper bag in terms of keeping a clear boundary like at certain points in my journey. And so then I had to improve what was happening.
So is that then the structure that's updating, or is that us?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I'm just working with
Maybe
it.
both.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's this interrelation evolutionary process, a co-creative process. Hey.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I suspect that your astral structures are set up in a co-creative way as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there we go. It's getting creative more than upgrading.
Yeah.
It's interesting question.
Yeah.
The collective consciousness of humanity is in trouble. Or maybe an opportunity of healing. And so every time I hope that every time I open up my spiral bridge and connect with nature in this way, whether it's healing a horse or another, the very fact that I've created it, the overlighting diva is there, the green man is there, the energy's there, that hopefully that gossamer, that connection feeds back into the collective consciousness to help heal that aspect. But in healing that, it helps heal the relationship back to nature. Right, and this is the bridge. That's why I call it the spiral bridge. Is that to bridge ourselves back in these ways using astral structures? Yes, helps us, and you're right. What does that do for them? It opens up that relationship again. They evolve with us. Yeah. Evelyn from Avalon, she's evolved now that I don't work with her in the same way, and I saw her evolve. So with us working together to make healing tools for others, she's evolved. So I think by the very art of us creating them in this co-creative way, whatever we do with them, I can almost feel them doing a Mexican wave with regards to, yes, the humans are getting back on track and connecting this energetic web that is fractured. I mean, we're sitting on this web creating all manner of artificial stuff. Goodness knows what the internet does on that natural web. It's almost creating another thing. So anything we do co-creatively will bring that healing backwards and forwards. Yeah, nice question. That's what it feels like to me. That's what it feels like to me. That every time I open up my spiral bridge or ignite it for somebody else, that those gossamers of light then create some weave, then that creates a fabric and strengthens the collectiveness of us all, which we're all attached to. Yeah. And that's my sense of it, though. But that's my experience anyway.
I agree. Every conversation you have with another aspect of nature, whether it's human or more than human, in a curious-minded and open-hearted way, stitches the world back together and enacts cultural repair on so many levels. That is what nature's asking us to do, is remember our relationship. Whether it's through the work that we individually and collectively offer, or in another way. How do you find right relationship with the rest of nature? Like that.
Yeah, just going for a walk, hey, you don't need even a spiral bridge, just going for a walk and just say thank you, you know. You know, there's this aspect, you know. So there's different ways of doing it, but yeah, we can do it that way too.
So we've reached our time, and I think we've basically covered almost everything we wanted to. Yeah.
Oh, and another thing.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yanti asked if we can say something more about the workshop. So when I heard that Paul was coming to South Africa, quickly booked him on certain dates. Yeah.
You know, we're going to get down and spiral.
And so Paul is going to be sharing his particular technology that he's developed with nature, called Spiral Bridge, as you've heard, and how to make your own and how to develop that further. More do you want to say?
Yeah, so it will be your personal spiral bridge. So you can develop it. We'll set you up with the co-creative agreement, put your higher self in there, use these two aspects, overlighting diva of healing, green man, or if there is something else that still reflects that is more culturally acceptable for you, we can use that. And then we would show you how to use it and invite anything in that you want to create your own specific, bespoke use of it, so it's yours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.